Hey everybody, welcome to Outdoor Retailers Camp Education Seminars. We're here with the team from Thermacell on the topic of Zika and mosquito-borne diseases and impact on the outdoor industry. So this is obviously a very hot topic. My name is Kenji Haratunian, by the way. I'm very familiar in these halls, and many of you I know. I'm working with different organizations in the industry with my own consultancy, and I'm also a board member of the Access Fund and Friends of Joshua Tree. And I was a retailer for many years, so this is a familiar place for me, and topics like this come up. Rarely do they come up with this much urgency, though, and literally as we're sitting down and talking about Zika and mosquito-borne diseases, there's a movement in the country that's kind of by storm. So I think there's some front page news today in the USA Today and in the Wall Street Journal around this topic. This is going to be very hot and getting hotter as the months go by, and even as the weeks go by, with a lot of people in South America at the Olympics next week. So before we start, I want to introduce the panel as well. So on our far right there, we have Erica Fixdahl. Erica is the general manager of the West Los Angeles store of Adventure 16, my old alma mater, and the flagship of that retail chain down in Southern California. She comes from Los Angeles with a degree from UC Berkeley and has traveled the world, most recently in Costa Rica as well as in Norway, and does a great job with a staff in a store over 20,000 square feet, focused on specialty retail. In the middle is Yoon Kim. Yoon is a journalist. He runs a company called Blogs for Brands, as well as being the publisher and editor of Gearographer. He wrote the cover story in March for Elevation Outdoors and is extremely sharp when it comes to trend spotting and content marketing in the digital age. And then next to me here is Bill Donahue. Bill is an entomologist as a professional. He recently came off a backpacking trip in the Sierra, but is quite knowledgeable about the issues of mosquitoes and how disease vectors happen in that scenario. He works with the CDC. He works on issues with the EPA, and is our topical expert here in the group. And again, my name is Kenji. I'm the former show director of Outdoor Retailer, as well as being a retailer and an outdoor skills instructor over many years since 1985. So I'm super psyched to be here, and we'll get on with the content right now. But first, also want to thank our sponsor, Thermacell, which is a company, you can see their booth. It's in Pavilion 3, and they do an area repellent that's very unique. You should check it out. All right, so we're going to get started with the topic. I'm going to hand it over to Bill here pretty soon, so you'll be able to learn some of the science behind this movement of what's happening in the U.S. around Zika and where the opportunities and interests are with your consumers and in the retail environment. So I think before we do that, actually we talked about the media already. This is something that is rising literally as we speak. So, Bill, you're going to talk about the science of this, where it's going, and then we're going to hear from the retail and the media angles, and we'd be glad to take questions from the audience as well around this hot topic in the U.S. Ready?
Okay. Well, as Kenji said, I just got back from a backpacking trip in the Eastern Sierra, and the mosquitoes have been worse this year than I've seen in the last 4 years. So I've got some firsthand knowledge about mosquitoes, repellents and things like that. Fortunately, no Zika where we were up backpacking. But I did want to kind of put it into perspective. You know, when most of us encounter mosquitoes, they're more of a nuisance. I got an opportunity to visit the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland, and they don't even consider U.S., even the diseases in the U.S. to be anywhere near what they are worldwide. So I want to kind of approach it from that perspective. However, I don't want to downplay Zika, West Nile virus, and other serious diseases that these insects can transmit. The slide up here shows, I give talks to school kids, and they come up to me and they go, "What's the most dangerous insect in the world?" And you know, they think bullet ants and these big wasps and things like that. And when I tell them mosquitoes, they have this kind of dejected look on their face. You know, what do you mean a mosquito? And I think the next graphic will show how many mosquito-borne deaths related versus other animals, you know, sharks and snakes, and from the previous slide, and even human-caused deaths. So insects, especially mosquitoes, are very important. So my job, I'm a medical veterinary entomologist. I do contract research on new ways to control insects, insect vectors, and the work I do goes towards US EPA registration as well as international registration. So a lot of my research is presented at scientific meetings. In fact, this year we're going to have the International Congress of Entomology is going to be in Orlando, Florida. So it just brings together entomologists from all parts of the world every 4 years. It's kind of like the Olympics of entomology, but probably not as exciting.
Well, it's in the right place, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, Orlando's had its problems too, so hopefully things will improve in South Florida as well as the rest of the world. But I'm here today to really pass on some good information that you can use, that you can tell your customers, that you can use in your marketing. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, I've studied a lot of insect diseases in medical entomology and veterinary entomology. So with mosquitoes, they're responsible for transmitting these viruses. The virus needs the mosquito in order to replicate and to be transmitted to a susceptible host. So when you think about the three components, you're going to have the mosquito or the vector, you're going to have the causative agent, the Zika, and then you're going to have the host, which is, in this case, humans. So with all of these, you get a very intricate transmission cycle. Now, I must say that Aedes aegypti is well studied. Almost every entomology lab that deals with mosquitoes has a colony of Aedes aegypti. We know this mosquito. We know it intimately. We know how to control it through vector control. But when you look at the list of other diseases, you know, a few years ago, 10 years ago, West Nile virus was the topic of the hot topic. Chikungunya. Most people don't recognize that one because they can't pronounce it. It took me 30 times. Yellow fever. How many people have heard of yellow fever? The Panama Canal and Walter Reed. Very classic studies in insect and disease transmission and biology. Equine encephalitis. So even our companion animals like horses are affected by these viral diseases. And then one that's here in the US also is dengue. I didn't realize it. I was reading one of my scientific journals, and there were 360 cases of dengue in Hawaii last year. 360 cases, and nobody's ever heard of it. So again, it's how the media picks up on these diseases and where they go with it. So if you look at mosquito transmission with Zika especially, you can see that it's through South America, Central America, and then pushing very, very close to North America. In fact, if you consider South Florida North America, which most people do, it's now here. So this disease is emerging rapidly. You know, I was backpacking for a week, and a week ago there were no transmissions, active transmissions in the US. I get back, and here we have 14 cases in South Florida. So it's a very emerging, dynamic disease that people need to keep on top of. Okay, in the United States, up to several weeks ago, most of the cases were from people that traveled, and I think Erica's going to discuss this a little bit, traveled to other parts of the world, picked up Zika, and then brought the disease back to the US. Well, if you know your entomology, you know that it's just a matter of time before the Aedes aegypti mosquito feeds on one of those victims and then transmits it. And that's what we're really concerned about now, and want to make sure that we can control those populations. Okay. As far as the range of Aedes aegypti, it's considered a tropical mosquito, But if you look at where on this map, these are CDC maps, you can see that Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, the Asian tiger mosquito, are both capable in going pretty far north in North America. So these are ranges where these mosquitoes are found. And if you contact your local mosquito abatement districts or vector control, they will have reported incidents of coming up with these in their trap counts. They also have sentinel chickens and other ways of monitoring diseases. So the U.S. has a very, very, very good mosquito control program. It's probably second to none in the world. Okay, so if you look at, I think, is this yours, Kuhn? Okay, we'll let Kuhn take this slide and we'll go from there. This will be kind of a tag team approach.
Go ahead, Yoon. Talk about this slide.
So in the summer between my junior and sophomore year of high school, I went to Tanzania and I got malaria. And that makes me an expert on Zika. I'm just kidding. I'm not an expert on Zika, but I am an expert on search. I've been doing search, SEO, paid search. I've been studying Google's changes for the last 12 years of my life. I'm a pretty young guy, but I've been doing this before you can make money on it. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today is search demand for the word Zika, and then Erica will talk about how to capitalize on that demand. Because search demand is the same thing as consumer demand. So let's look at this first little screenshot here. So this is a special project that Google put together for the word Zika virus. As you can see, there are more searches in Anchorage. So the size of the circle represents the number of searches in the last month, the last 30 days. And I took the screenshot yesterday. There are more searches in Anchorage than there are in Honolulu. And you can just see that people are really worried about the word Zika virus all around the United States. It's not just in Hawaii or Florida. I mean, it's all the way up into Minnesota. So that's just an interesting way to visualize the data of where people are searching. So in other words, people are looking for these products, not just in coastal cities. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. So this is what's called a Google Trends graph, and most people recognize what a Google Trends graph is. But basically, it's a representation of how many people are searching for the term, whatever terms I put up there. I put Zika virus and HIV/AIDS. There are more people searching for the word Zika virus today than the term HIV/AIDS by a factor of maybe 20% or something. And you can kind of see the trajectory of when people started searching for that term. Now, I believe my role on the panel is to discuss Zika from a media perspective. And the way that I understand, so I'm not sure, so a lot of times media either catches up to consumer demand or they cause consumer demand. In this case, I'm not really sure what's caused what. But what I do know is both the front page of the Wall Street Journal today and the front page of USA Today today, the cover story is about Zika. So that means there is a lot of search demand, and again, search demand is the same thing as consumer demand. So Erica is going to talk about how we can capitalize on this consumer demand through retail.
Thanks, Yoon. Hi, everybody. Certainly, as a retailer, we do want to capitalize on it, but also as an outfitter, we really want to approach this as a service to our consumers, and something that if they're coming to us because they're concerned, that we are responding appropriately, and we're responding with the information that they're looking for. They're coming in without a lot of information or knowledge. They're just a little bit freaked out by the news. So we want to be able to respond to that and provide them with the information they're looking for, where we're getting that information. I think Bill's going to talk about it in a few minutes. But also just making sure that we have the product that they're looking for, that they feel they're going to be comfortable with it, they're going to be protected, and making sure that we respond to their needs as well. So.
Thanks, Erica. Bill, you want to keep going on your thing, or? really we kind of interrupted that with a little media exposure just to talk about like what's happening right now and where the demand's going to be for your businesses looking out a couple weeks, a couple months, and into the fall. So we'll get back around maybe to that, Erica. But Bill, you want to keep going on Zika?
Sure. Here is a brief description of some of the symptoms of Zika virus. Now remember that with both Zika and West Nile virus, about 85% of the people that are infected show no symptoms whatsoever. So it's a very small number of people that actually show the symptoms of Zika or some of these other diseases. Most people won't know that they have it. They might feel bad. It might be flu-like symptoms. It's usually mild, lasting about a week or two. They're not even sure on how long the virus stays active in the body. The thing about Zika, the most common symptoms, what do they have there? Red eyes, joint pain, rash, and fever. And if you look at just about every insect disease or tick-borne disease, they're all the same symptoms. And that's why they often go undiagnosed by the medical community, is because they're just kind of general symptoms. The one unique thing I noted about Zika virus is that normally, I told you it's a very elaborate process from the mosquito with the virus inside the mosquito replicating and then going back out to another susceptible host. Well, with Zika, it seems like there could be human-to-human transmission as well. So I'm sure everyone's aware of the sexual transmission of Zika, which is very, very unique. The only other disease I can offhand think of that has a human-to-human transmission is pneumonic plague. And so very unique. So this one is going to be one that's going to be heavily studied by the medical community and epidemiological teams. Okay, mosquito-borne diseases and fatalities. Here, if you look at the number of people coming down with a number of these diseases, you can see that most of them have very low incidence rates throughout the United States. But if you look at chikungunya, West Nile virus, and Zika virus, you can see that those numbers are beginning to be quite substantial. The other thing is, if you look at West Nile virus, you're going to see the fatalities that are involved with that. There's oftentimes, for the most severe cases, very long, drawn-out hospital cases that oftentimes end up in death. So they're diseases that we really need to be aware of and continue to manage. Talk about West Nile and neuroinvasive. This is what I mean by the more severe cases. And in our hometown of Modesto, California, we've had a number of cases there over the last few years, 2 to 3 fatalities. So for a small town in Central California, it just shows how widespread this is. So that's part of the reason for the concern about Zika, is we don't know how fast it will spread and what the eventual implications will be. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about are really repellents. I think if you listen to news reports, they're going to talk about a number of ways of eliminating mosquitoes or reducing their numbers, at least. The American Mosquito Control Association has a Fight the Bite campaign. So it's an educational campaign to inform people about mosquitoes in the urban environment. So they'll have you emptying out water vessels, make sure there's no standing water. Maintain your swimming pools. During the housing crisis, a lot of the swimming pools went derelict, and there were just incredible mosquito breeding sites within the middle of cities. So it got to be very, very, very troublesome to try to control mosquitoes. If you look at the types of products that are available, and I took a quick walk through the exhibit plus what I work with, you have a number of different choices when it comes to mosquito repellents. We have some that are called the 25B, which means they're EPA exempt. And these are usually botanical products that have insecticidal or repellent activity. The thing is, they're exempt from registration because they're generally recognized as safe by FDA. Most of those are food additives, so If you can eat them, then certainly you can formulate them as an insecticide or a repellent. However, they're not subject to the rigorous testing that you would encounter for an EPA registered product. You know, everyone picks on DEET and some of the chemical repellents. However, they're extensively tested in laboratories all over the United States as well as the world. Government labs, USDA has a large program. As an independent contract lab, I have programs going, and then also a number of the universities. So they're very well studied. Plus the manufacturers will do other studies like toxicology studies, shelf life stability studies, formulation studies, and all of these are important to ensure the effectiveness of the repellent product. So when you're looking for a repellent product, I would look for one that's got some research behind it. Imagine a scientist saying that. So, but there are two different types of repellents. We have the personal repellents, like people think of with DEET, where you put it on your person, and then you have the spatial repellents. And this is where Thermacell comes in, because what they're doing is they're protecting an area using a repellent material rather than putting it on your skin. There are other types. What do they have in here? Okay. The citronella, you know, the candles, the old mosquito coils. How many are familiar with those? You go up into the north woods of Canada and they're burning everywhere. So these types of products have been around for a while. Some of their efficacy is in question. And a lot of it is just personal experience and how they're used. I mentioned also the CDC there. They don't really regulate pesticides, and most of their recommendations are towards human exposure. You know, as an epidemiological team, CDC would say these are the risks to humans as you travel, and Erica and you can certainly address those, but the testing is not done by CDC. Okay, then we have things like oil of lemon eucalyptus. Picaridin is a new one that's come out. IR 3535. I don't know why they never gave that one a name, but I guess they like the numbers. Avon Skin So Soft is kind of a unique story, because when Avon Skin So Soft first came onto the market, it was not marketed as an insect repellent, but people noticed that they were seeing a reduction in mosquito bites by using Skin So Soft. So oftentimes if you went into a camping store or those country markets before you go up into the high country, you'd see the Avon Skin So Soft right next to the off. Now Avon has put picaridin and other insect repellents, known insect repellents, in their Avon Skin So Soft product to get that repellent claim. Avon never made the repellent claim, the general public did. Okay, and then we have things like alethrin, which is in the Thermacell product. Permethrin is used extensively in military uniforms and then clothing, where the insecticide or the insect repellent is put right into the clothing. So those are just briefly a little bit about insect repellents, formulations, and how they're regulated.
Oh, yeah, I'll jump in. So thanks, Bill. That's a lot of the sort of science behind it. You're going to want to share that with your customers, with your retail store staff, and with the people that come into your circle. Not necessarily getting into the depths of it, but being able to get a conversation going that helps them feel better that there are these solutions. And really, what we're calling it is your Mosquito Toolkit. So what's in your Mosquito Toolkit? It's going to be all of the arsenal pieces. Are going to be your apparel that's treated, your area repellents, your topical repellents, and your physical barriers, your mosquito netting, for example, over your bed or your head net. So, and most of the retail stores do sell products here, and what you can anticipate is more interest in those products as the news starts to raise awareness. Even if people are going backpacking in the Sierra or on the Appalachian Trail, their awareness of mosquitoes, of getting bit, and of the discomfort of it, if not the risk to health, is going to be higher up in their consciousness. So, Erica, before we go into this, talking about the outdoor enthusiast, What kind of questions are you hearing on the retail floor in California about mosquito-borne illness, and what kind of things are your customers saying?
Well, I think the biggest question is just, what do I need? That's what we hear all day, every day. What do I need? And they don't really understand, whether it's Zika or any other time where they're going to be around a lot of mosquitoes. They don't really understand what the results might be if they do get bitten. They don't understand what Zika really is. They don't understand how it's transmitted. So they have these questions for us as well, and that's why I say we need to be educated so that we can educate our customers as well on that. But those are the main questions. Just, what do I need to protect myself? Do I need all of this? Do I need the skin repellents? Do I need the clothing? Do I need a mosquito net? They're very hesitant to go that far. It's inhibitive. Certainly the backpacker being different than the traveler in that regard. But they're really looking to us to just tell them what they need. And
Is there a mix between traveler and backpacker? I mean, do you feel like the one is more interested in one kind of product or solution in their toolkit versus another?
certainly the traveler is definitely more concerned about disease than the backpacker is. The backpacker, it's more of a, I don't want to be itchy, I don't want to get bitten. What do I need to keep from being itchy and being uncomfortable? But the traveler is definitely concerned with disease more so.
And Yoon, in your experience, since you've been affected by this, does that change how you kind of look at products now on your own trips and your own climbing and backpacking trips?
Yeah, I think so. I might ask that question with a question. How many folks here represent a small shop? Or any kind of retailer? Okay. So I guess the question that I would have, so I was just talking to the folks over at Stansport, and they make great, they make mosquito nets. And they were just like, we're just selling a bunch of them like crazy all of a sudden. I was like, yeah, it's because there's this thing called Zika going around. And they're like, oh, I didn't realize that. And so I guess that's my question is, if you're seeing people ask more, like, are people coming in and asking a whole bunch about, like, do you see the volume of questions increasing? Absolutely.
We've seen not only the increase in questions, but increase in sales as well. We're up about 30% from last year for June and July in insect apparel, and about 20% in skin repellents, and about 10% in mosquito nets. So we're definitely seeing an increase.
So that would answer the question of how does that affect my purchasing behavior when I go on these trips is, yeah, I mean.
Great, thank you. And so just back to the toolkit, we talked about the personal spray, the area repellent, the screens and nets, the physical repellent, or the physical barriers, I should say. In my experience, I've been on a trip where the mosquitoes in the Sierra were so bad, I was relegated to my tent. Like, I literally had to zip up the tent and just hide. And it's not very fun. So I think, being able to address your customer base with that kind of full toolkit awareness is going to be the key. It's not either or. Either I wear permethrin apparel or I have an area repellent. It's going to be both. And that's the point of this. Where do you go? If your customers, a lot of times they come into your shops or they're looking at your site and they want to know where to get more information. Some of the most obvious ones are the World Health Organization. And certainly for travelers that are going abroad, your customers that might be going down into South America. The CDC has great information, Centers for Disease Control. There's also the AMCA, the American Mosquito Control Agency. So that's specifically around mosquito pressure areas. The ESA is the Entomological Society of America. I'm sure you remember, Bill. And the SOBE, the Society of Vector Ecology. So is there anything you want to comment on any of these resources?
You can go to their websites. Probably the one with Zika that's most commonly referred to is the CDC. Everybody's looking at the incidents. if I'm traveling, am I going to come in contact or potentially come in contact with Zika? There's, like I mentioned earlier, other diseases, other mosquito species. So you may want to look at the American Mosquito Control Association, because they're focused on North America, primarily the United States. The Entomological Society, there's a lot of overlap in here, but AMCA is the one that specifically deals with mosquitoes. They've got all of them have up-to-date information, but there's a broader base of information with AMCA. Society of Vector Ecology, that studies whole disease cycles, and that kind of information goes back to CDC and WHO. So all of these are interconnected. They're good sites. They should be providing reliable information, and I would trust them so that you can go out and inform your customers.
And by the way, if you're interested in getting a copy of this deck, it is available. Just leave me your business card here, and I'll make sure you get it, or leave it with one of the Thermacell folks that are here as well. So questions. I'm going to go ahead and seed a few, but would love to hear from you what your questions are, maybe relevant to your own business or your own geography. Zika and other mosquito-borne illnesses have a different effect in different geographies, but you could see from Yoon's slide earlier, it's really nationwide, the interest level and the concern on it. So on that, Yoon, I'll come back to you. What is a typical curve of this awareness? So the media kind of runs in cycles, right? So is this thing going to be done by the time snow starts falling in the fall? Is it going to rise back up in the spring, or is it going to be a continuous, a rise? And what kind of opportunity does that present to the outdoor industry?
So it's definitely seasonal. You'll see search trends, spike, stay up, and then fall, in the winter. But my personal theory behind this, Zika, is that it'll be a permanent part of the search landscape. And it might be that because right now people are learning about it, it'll be up here, and the next season it'll be up here. But I mean, it'll be, I guess, whoever ranks for that term, Zika virus devices or Zika backpacking solutions, will, whoever ranks in Google for those terms are going to be, doing pretty well. So I think it's going to stay seasonal, but just because as far as what I've been told and what I've heard, Zika's not going anywhere. It's like it's here and it's here to stay, and now we have this thing forever. So the search, it might fluctuate a little bit, but there's still going to be the spikes every summer.
Right. So as a business in the outdoor industry, how are you going to prepare for this? Are you going to, wait for the spike to come and then try to get product, or do you need to really get way out ahead of this? Where are the resources? Maybe Erica, you might speak to that. How is A16 going to respond to this in a way that's, make sure you're able to serve customers and not be on the reactive side, but the proactive side?
Sure, and I think we are a little bit unique in that we do pretty year-round business as far as that goes. Our backpacker is definitely seasonal, but our traveler is year-round. So I think that our plan is to stay in stock, in inventory, in the core product of bug protection year-round, and just make sure that we're communicating well with our vendors, and that we know if they are not going to be in stock, so that we can prepare for that and look elsewhere, for replacements or whatever need be. But we're in pretty good communication with our vendors and making sure that we are getting the product that we need on a consistent basis.
Thanks. And anecdotally, when you see customers coming up to the register, are they carrying all the parts of the toolkit, or are they usually just relying on one, or is it kind of across the board?
A few of them are. Definitely the more paranoid ones are. everything and anything they can possibly get. But like I mentioned before, that the head nets are a little bit less so. That's the last bit of the package that they don't necessarily go for the traveler, but for the backpacker, sure. A lot of people are asking, well, do I really need this? Do I really need that? Can't I just get away with one spray and not the apparel? And it really depends on where they're going and what they're doing, and as far as what we recommend. But most people are covering themselves from head to toe, and whether that is with clothing and repellents or just repellents where they're exposed. We are recommending people to treat their clothing with permethrin on a regular basis. A lot of people don't know about that option, so that is something that we do try to educate our customers. If they don't want to buy into the insect repellent apparel, they can treat their own clothing, and that's a good option as well. And some concern from, definitely from parents about children and repellent use for children, and we do respond to that with as much information as we have, and that it is safe, and which ones are safe and what they can use. And so they're a little bit more hesitant to buy into the whole package, but as long as we give them the information that they have, and they end up leaving with everything that they need. So
Cool, thanks. So one of the things I did in preparing for this panel is I reached out to some other friends in the industry in different geographies and in different roles. One of my friends, Jerry Fullington, is the general manager at Massey's Professional Outfitters down in New Orleans and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is known as mosquito country. At least that's what he says. I've been to visit him a few times, and it seems to be true. So he had some things to say, actually quite a bit to say about the topic. They're getting a lot of interest around this. And what I asked him was, well, where is the point of confusion? Where does the customer start to not seem to be unsure or unclear about what their solutions are? So he says this. Jerry says, the biggest area where the consumer gets confused is when making purchases of treated apparel or treated netting. These products are often merchandised alongside very similar products that have no such treatment, which can lead to confusion. While there are no international symbols that I know of for insect protection, actually Steve and I were talking about a symbol that would make sense to show a mosquito with a red slash through it or something. The product must be differentiated by an obvious change in the hang tag. So this is an opportunity for you. This can be a difference in size, color, or shape, but should contain some information as to the effectiveness of the treatment. Also, the vendor's labels on the product itself must be different. This makes for a quick identification by staff and consumer, or is helpful in the instance that a hang tag is lost. Thirdly, there should be some differentiation via call-out style at the point of purchase. As opposed to special fixtures that may segregate the product or become unused as products sell down, proper signage or callouts can move with the product. Properly designated, these will also help sales staff locate specialty product among a sea of racks. The key is not any one of these indicators, but rather using all three. The fourth selling aid is training and awareness. The vendor's site should have a special section with reputable sources that indicates the issue and how their product addresses the consumer's concern. This can easily be included in 3.5 training or in-store training clinics. Not sure if these 2 cents are of any use to you, but there you have it. Sincerely, scratching like crazy after writing this, Jerry Fullington. So I got Jerry to get real itchy, but that's some insights into the retail environment in the South. Hey, by the way, is Brian Thompson here? Brian, are you in the audience? Brian is with a clothing brand, Ex Officio, that does treated apparel. So that's one of those solutions in your toolkit. And at this point, I want to kind of look to you, the audience, to say, do you have questions for the panel on the issue of Zika and mosquito-borne impact on the outdoor industry? So anyone? Oh, don't be shy. In the front here.
I have a question for Erica. To what extent do you see people coming in for mosquito repellent as a planned purchase? Erica, to what extent do you see people coming coming in for mosquito repellents as an impulse versus a planned purchase? And then how does that affect your merchandising strategy? Can you repeat the question?
So the question was how much of the business is in impulse purchasing versus planned purchasing of insect protection. And I would say it's mostly planned. If I had to really take a guess at it, I'd say mostly planned. Although we do certainly merchandise in impulse areas as well. And it does sometimes come as an afterthought, for sure. But right now, because of what's going on with Zika and the media and the season and our proximity to the Sierra and the boom that's happening with mosquitoes there this season, it's definitely mostly planned, I would say. Yeah.
Thanks, Erica. Are there other questions? There's a microphone in the back for you if you want to ask it there.
Kenji, I can say one more thing. I didn't quite answer the merchandising question, but we certainly have set up displays specific to bug protection and put those in prominent areas in our stores and made sure to really call it out so that if people don't come in intending to purchase repellents, that they are reminded that you need it. So.
Bill, do you have anything to add around the uniqueness of Zika, not just the human-to-human transmission, but also kind of the effects on pregnant women?
Yeah, one of the most disturbing things about Zika is when you see the pictures of the infants with microcephaly. That really tugs at the heartstrings and lets you know how serious this disease is, even if the number of cases is relatively small. So there's that fear, especially with young women and people wanting to start families, that this could have a life-altering event in their lives should their child be born with this. So it's different than just recovering from, say, malaria, not to downplay any of that, but you do get over most of those diseases. This is one that will be a constant reminder of how serious this disease is.
Thanks. And does anyone in the audience, or maybe Erica or Yoon, have experience knowing that people canceled trips because of a fear of this, of Zika? If you just raise your hand if you've heard of that. Yeah, I actually had a panel at a different show called ICAST in Florida, in Orlando, the big fishing show. And one of the panelists had to cancel because his wife was pregnant, and he was really afraid to go to Florida where there'd be thousands of people in a convention center, many of them local, even though it was before there was even a verified case of transmission within the state. Now you look back and it's like probably a smart thing, but he just didn't want to take any chances with his pregnant wife.
One of the things I also wanted to add, we're focusing on Zika and mosquito-borne diseases, but last year I had a case in the Eastern Sierra of a tick-borne relapsing fever. And the woman that contracted this, it was just really debilitating. They weren't sure she was going to recover for it. In the Sacramento area, Lake Tahoe, bubonic plague is still very prevalent. And when Zika came out, I was kind of appalled by the newscasters making fun of bubonic plague. They just kind of downplayed bubonic plague, but those that know history and read it know that it killed 1/4 of the population in Europe over a period in the Dark Ages. And it's a very real disease. People don't realize the number of diseases that are still out there just waiting to come back. Typhus, for example, the bubonic and pneumonic plague, hantavirus. Last year in Yosemite, they had to close down Curry Village. I think they changed the name of that after but anyway, they closed it down because of hantavirus. So this whole thing about going into the outdoors, being aware of the arthropod or insect-borne threats that are out there, I think is real. And as retailers, you can really convey that information to people that wouldn't even suspect it. So I look at the retailers as being a point of information transfer, you know.
Well, thanks a lot, panel. I have one more. I ran into, coming in yesterday in the airport, I ran into Jeff Weidman. Jeff is the board director for the Big City Mountaineers, and he lives up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And just walking with him in the airport, he was sharing with me, well, Minneapolis is pretty famous for, you know, giant flying insects or mosquitoes that like lift off with your children or something like that. That's the, yeah, that state bird, that's what it was, yeah. So mosquito's a state bird of Minnesota. And he was sharing, well, you know, just sitting on his porch and chatting or barbecuing, you know, he's got mosquito pressure, I think, like the term that you use. And how does he deal with it? You know, he doesn't want to just like douse himself on a daily basis with repellent necessarily, but he does use an area repellent. He had used it for the first time, and he was really amazed at how effective it was, beyond the kind of the coils and citronella candles that I grew up in retail with. So there are some new solutions. They seem to be quite effective. So I would just say, are there other questions that anyone has in the audience? Because I do want to invite you to visit the Thermacell booth. They're out in P3. The booth number is 3060 in PV3, right where the tunnel crosses over from Venture Out. So if you go to see the Venture Out thing, which is worth seeing, make sure you get through the tunnel and visit with Thermacell, and you can see some of this area repellent product in action. And I just want to say thanks to Erica and Yoon, as well as Bill Donahue, our entomologist, and Thermacell, the sponsor. So thanks for spending your time learning about this. If you want to get the deck, I'd be glad to get it sent to you. Just leave me your business card up here, and have a great rest of the show, and enjoy it. Make the best.